My daughter-in-law handed me the wrong pill bottle that morning. I didn't think much of it at first. We all make mistakes, right? But something felt off. Hours later, when I finally looked at the label, my hands started shaking. I read the name twice, maybe 3 times, hoping I'd gotten it wrong. It wasn't her name. It wasn't mine either. The warning on that label mentioned my son, and it shouldn't have. Right there, in plain English. His full name staring back at me like some kind of accusation I didn't understand yet. At that moment, standing in my own kitchen with that bottle in my hand, I realized something very serious was happening inside my own family. Something nobody had bothered to tell me about. My name's Robert, and I'm 72 years old. I spent most of my life working construction, building foundations, reinforcing structures, making sure things could hold weight long after I was gone. When my wife passed 3 years ago, I thought I'd seen the worst life could throw at me. Turns out, grief has layers you don't expect. The silence in the house got heavier every week, and eventually, I couldn't carry it alone anymore. So when my son David asked if I'd consider moving closer to him and his wife, I didn't hesitate. Family's supposed to be the foundation, right? David's always been a good kid. Well, good man now, I guess. He's 43, works in logistics, steady job, decent income. But over the years, I'd noticed the cracks. He'd call me less, seem tired more often, like something was weighing him down. I chalked it up to work stress, maybe marriage stuff. Hell, what do I know? I've been widowed longer than some folks have been married. His wife, Caroline, seemed like a blessing at first. She was organized, polite, always remembered my birthday. When I moved into the small house just 2 blocks from theirs, she volunteered to help manage my medications and doctor's appointments. I appreciated it more than I said. When you get older, you start measuring life differently, not by how much money you've got left, but by how many people still need you. And honestly, how many people you can still protect. I thought helping David financially now and then was my way of staying useful. He never asked directly, but I'd slip him some cash when I noticed things getting tight. A father knows. You see the strain in your kid's eyes, and you just want to fix it, even when they don't tell you what's broken. Caroline took over organizing my pill containers about 6 months ago. She'd come by every Sunday evening with those little plastic boxes labeled with the days of the week, each compartment filled perfectly. "This one's for morning, Dad," she'd say. She started calling me Dad pretty early on, which felt nice, honestly. "This one's for bedtime. Don't skip any, okay?" I trusted her completely. Why wouldn't I? She seemed like she genuinely cared, and God knows I needed the help keeping track of everything. My memory's not what it used to be, but looking back now, there were small things I ignored, little moments that didn't quite add up, but I explained them away because that's what you do when you love someone. You give them the benefit of the doubt. You assume the best. David had been looking thinner lately, more exhausted, like he wasn't sleeping right. A couple times he'd made weird comments, things like, "At least when you're gone, you're finally resting, you know." I figured it was just burnout talking, stress from work, maybe some family betrayal I didn't know about at his job. I never imagined the weight he was carrying was something far worse. Every morning started the same way. I'd wake up around 6:30, make myself some coffee, and sit down at the kitchen table with my little blue pill organizer. Caroline had this whole system worked out, color-coded, labeled, foolproof. Monday through Sunday, morning and evening doses, everything separated and ready to go. It gave me structure, and honestly, it made me feel less like a burden. She'd even set reminders on my phone so I wouldn't forget. "We can't have you missing these, Dad," she'd say with that sweet smile. "They're keeping you healthy." I trusted that routine more than I trusted my own memory, and I trusted Caroline because she'd earned it. She'd drive me to appointments, pick up my prescriptions, even cook extra meals and bring them over in those neat little containers. David would joke that she was more organized than a military operation, and we'd all laugh. But beneath the jokes, I could see the weight on my son's shoulders. He'd come by sometimes looking like he'd aged 5 years in a week, pale, exhausted. His hands would shake slightly when he poured himself coffee, and he'd zone out mid-conversation like his mind was somewhere far away. "You okay, son?" I'd ask him, trying not to sound too worried. He'd always brush it off. "Yeah, Dad, just work stuff. You know how it gets." But I didn't know. Not really. Because the way he said it felt rehearsed, like he'd practiced that answer in the mirror. Caroline would jump in quickly, changing the subject, asking if I needed anything from the store. Looking back, I realized now she was redirecting, protecting something, or maybe protecting someone. At the time, I just thought she was being thoughtful. David had always been healthy as a horse, or at least that's what I believed. He played sports in high school, never had any serious medical issues, nothing that would require daily medication. So when I noticed an extra bottle in the bathroom cabinet one afternoon, I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe it was something minor, like vitamins or allergy pills. Caroline said it was for stress management, that his doctor recommended it because of work pressure. "Nothing serious, Dad. Just helps him sleep better." And I believed her. Why wouldn't I? She had no reason to lie to me. But the signs were there, scattered like breadcrumbs I was too blind to follow. He'd mention feeling tired all the time, joke about checking out early, in that dark way people do when they're half serious. Once, he looked me dead in the eye and said, "If I don't wake up one day, at least it'll finally be quiet." You know? I laughed it off, told him to stop being so dramatic. But that sentence haunted me later. It echoed in my head when everything started unraveling, when I realized those weren't jokes at all. They were confessions I was too trusting to hear. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I remember because Tuesdays were always quiet. No appointments, no errands, just me in the house and whatever was on TV. I reached into my pill organizer around 2 o'clock, same as always. But something felt wrong the second I touched the bottle sitting next to it. It wasn't in its usual spot. Caroline must have set it down there by mistake when she refilled everything the night before. I picked it up, figuring I'd just put it back where it belonged, but curiosity got the better of me. I flipped it over to read the label. That's when everything stopped. My son's name was printed right there, David Franklin Morrison, in bold letters across the front. Not mine, not Caroline's, his. I blinked hard, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the letters didn't change. Beneath his name was a dosage I didn't recognize and a warning label I'd never seen on any of my medications before. It was specific, clinical, the kind of thing that makes your stomach drop because you know, instinctively, that it's serious. I read it twice, maybe 3 times, trying to make sense of why my son would need something like this. The worst part wasn't just seeing his name. It was realizing I had no idea he was taking anything at all. David had never mentioned being sick, never said a word about needing medication, let alone something with a warning this severe. I stood there in my kitchen, holding that bottle like it was evidence of some crime I didn't understand yet. My mind raced through every conversation we'd had over the past year, searching for clues I might have missed. Had he told me something and I'd forgotten? Was I losing my memory worse than I thought? Or had he deliberately kept this from me? I set the bottle down on the counter and stared at it for a long time. It didn't make sense for me to have it, but it also didn't make sense for him to need it. David was 43, relatively healthy, no major surgeries or chronic conditions that I knew of. So why was this here? Why was it mixed in with my medications? And why hadn't anyone told me? The questions piled up like a foundation cracking under too much weight, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something much bigger was hiding just beneath the surface. Something nobody wanted me to see. I didn't call David right away. I didn't confront Caroline either. Instead, I sat down at the kitchen table and just stared at that label, letting the weight of it settle into my chest. This wasn't an accident. It couldn't be. People don't just accidentally mix up medications this serious. There was a reason that bottle ended up in my house, in my hands, at this exact moment. And whatever that reason was, It scared the hell out of me. Because deep down, I already knew this wasn't about a simple mix-up. This was about family betrayal I wasn't ready to face. I couldn't just sit there and do nothing. That bottle was burning a hole in my brain, demanding answers I didn't have. So I did what any father would do when something doesn't add up. I started digging. I grabbed my laptop, typed the medication name into Google, and hit search. What came back made my blood run cold. This wasn't some routine prescription for stress or sleep like Caroline had mentioned. This was something prescribed in very specific, very serious circumstances. The kind of thing doctors don't hand out unless there's a damn good reason, or a damn dangerous one. The medical websites used words I had to read 3 times to understand. But the general picture was clear enough. This medication was heavy. It wasn't something you took casually. And it definitely wasn't something you hid from your family unless you were trying to keep a secret. A big one. I kept scrolling, reading patient forums, side effect warnings, dosage guidelines, and with every click, the pit in my stomach grew deeper. Why would David need this? What the hell was going on that nobody thought I deserved to know about? I'm his father, for God's sake. If he was struggling, why wouldn't he come to me? Then a worse thought crept in, slow and venomous like poison through a cracked pipe. What if he didn't know either? What if someone else was controlling this? I tried to push that idea away, told myself I was being paranoid, but it stuck. It lingered. Because the more I thought about it, the more it made a sick kind of sense. Caroline had been managing all my medications for months. She had access. She had opportunity. And she'd been the one insisting David didn't need to worry me with small health things. What if this wasn't small at all? I decided to test the waters. That evening, when Caroline stopped by to drop off groceries, I casually brought it up. "Hey, I noticed one of the bottles got mixed in with mine earlier," I said, keeping my tone light, almost apologetic. "David's name was on it. Everything okay with him?" Her response came too fast. Way too fast. She didn't even pause to think. "Oh, with that? Yeah. It's nothing serious, Dad. Just something his doctor prescribed for work stress. You know how intense his job's been lately." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Then she added the kicker. "Please don't mention it to him, okay? He gets embarrassed about needing help. Let's just keep it between us." That's when I knew. When someone asks you not to worry the person the medication belongs to, that's not protection, that's control. That's manipulation dressed up as care. I nodded, told her I understood, watched her leave with that same sweet smile she always wore. But inside, every alarm bell I had was screaming. This wasn't about protecting David's pride. This was about keeping me in the dark. And the worst part, I'd been letting it happen for months, trusting blindly because I wanted to believe my family was safe. But family betrayal doesn't always come with warnings. Sometimes it comes with a smile and a pill organizer. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched my son fall apart. Not all at once. That would have been too obvious. No, this was slow, like watching a building lose its structural integrity one beam at a time. He'd come over for Sunday dinner, but he barely ate, just pushed food around his plate with this distant look in his eyes, like he was already somewhere else, somewhere final. He'd lost weight, probably 15 pounds he didn't have to lose, and his skin had this grayish tint that scared me more than I wanted to admit. When I asked if he was feeling all right, he'd just nod and say he was tired, but it wasn't normal tired. This was the kind of exhaustion that lives in your bones, that makes every movement look like it costs something. One evening, we were sitting on my porch, just the 2 of us, and he said something that made my heart stop. "You ever think about just not waking up, Dad? Like, not in a bad way, just peaceful, like turning off a light?" I tried to laugh it off, told him he was talking crazy, but he didn't laugh back. He just stared out at the street and nodded slowly, like he'd already made peace with something I couldn't see yet. That's when I knew this wasn't burnout. This was something darker. He started tying up loose ends. I didn't recognize it at first, but looking back, it was obvious. He asked me about the truck I'd promised to leave him in my will, said he wanted to make sure the title paperwork was clear. He brought up old family photos, asking if I had copies of certain ones, like he was cataloging memories before they disappeared. Then one night, he hugged me longer than usual when he left, held on tight, like he was saying goodbye. "I love you, Dad," he said, his voice cracking just a little. "I need you to know that, no matter what happens." I told him I loved him too, but my hands were shaking when I closed the door. Caroline was always there, hovering in the background, managing everything. She'd cut into our conversations with reminders about appointments or medications, always steering things away when David started getting too emotional. "He's just overwhelmed right now, Dad," she'd say with that practiced smile. "Work's been brutal. He'll bounce back." But he wasn't bouncing back. He was sinking. And every time I tried to reach him, really reach him, she'd insert herself between us like a wall I couldn't break through. It felt deliberate, controlled, like she was orchestrating something I wasn't supposed to interfere with. The worst part was the silence. David stopped calling me just to talk. He stopped asking for advice or telling me about his week. Our relationship, which had always been solid, built on years of trust and love, was crumbling, and I didn't know how to stop it. I kept thinking about that medication bottle, about the warning label, about Caroline's too fast explanation. And somewhere deep in my gut, beneath all the fear and confusion, a terrible thought started forming. What if this wasn't just family betrayal? What if this was something much worse? What if my son was being erased, piece by piece, and I was the only one who could see it happening? I stopped sleeping well after that. Every night, I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying every conversation, every moment, every little thing I'd ignored because I wanted to believe everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. Nothing about this was fine. So I did what any father would do when the foundation of his family starts cracking. I started looking for answers. Quietly. Carefully. Because something told me that if I asked the wrong questions out loud, whoever was controlling this situation would just cover their tracks faster. I needed evidence. I needed to understand what the hell was happening to my son before it was too late. I started in the bathroom. David and Caroline's bathroom, specifically, the one time they invited me over for dinner, and I excused myself. I opened the medicine cabinet, hands shaking like a damn thief in my own son's house, and started reading labels. There were at least 6 different prescription bottles in there, way more than any healthy 43-year-old should have. I took pictures with my phone, zoomed in on the dates, the dosages, the prescribing doctor's name. Some of the bottles were months old, refilled multiple times. Others were new. But what struck me most was that half of them had instructions that contradicted each other. You don't need to be a doctor to know that's dangerous as hell. Back home, I spread everything out on my kitchen table like I was building a case. I printed out the photos, grabbed a notebook, and started writing down dates. When did David start looking sick? When did Caroline start managing my medications? When did those weird comments about finally resting begin? I cross-referenced everything, and a timeline started forming, ugly, undeniable, and cold as ice. 6 months ago, right around the time Caroline took over organizing my pills, David's health took a nosedive. That wasn't coincidence. That was cause and effect. And the more I dug, the clearer it became that someone had been orchestrating this decline methodically, carefully, like a controlled demolition. I called David's doctor's office, pretending I needed to confirm an appointment. The receptionist was friendly enough, and I casually asked if Dr. Sanders was still seeing David regularly. There was a pause. "I'm sorry, sir, but we don't have a David Morrison in our system." My heart stopped. I stammered something about maybe getting the name wrong and hung up. That prescription bottle I'd found, the one with the doctor's name printed right on it, that doctor didn't exist in their records. Either David had switched doctors without telling anyone, or someone had been filling those prescriptions through channels that didn't add up. Neither option was good. I went through old bills, insurance statements, anything I could find in the boxes David had stored in my garage. And that's when I found it, a life insurance policy, a big one, Updated 8 months ago with Caroline listed as the sole beneficiary. My son's signature was at the bottom, but the handwriting looked shaky, almost forced. I sat there staring at that document, feeling my whole world tilt sideways. This wasn't just about medication. This wasn't just about family betrayal or secrets. This was about something far more deliberate, far more calculated. Someone had been planning this, and my son, my boy, had been walking toward the edge of a cliff while I stood by and watched, too trusting to see the hands pushing him forward. I waited until Caroline left for her book club, Thursday nights, 7 o'clock sharp, like clockwork. I drove to David's house with that medication bottle in my jacket pocket, the insurance policy folded in my other hand, and a knot in my chest so tight I could barely breathe. When he opened the door, he looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Hollow, like the weight of the world had finally crushed whatever was left. "Dad, everything okay?" I didn't answer. I just walked past him into the living room, set that bottle on the coffee table, and watched his face. He stared at it, then at me, then back at the bottle. "David," I said, and my voice cracked saying his name. "Your name is on this, but you told me you didn't know about any medications." He picked it up slowly, hands trembling, reading the label like it was written in a language he didn't speak. His face went white. Not pale, white, like every drop of blood drained out in a single second. I don't understand. Where did you get this?" I told him the truth, that Caroline had been organizing my pills, that this got mixed in, that when I asked her about it, she told me not to worry him. The silence that followed was the loudest thing I've ever heard. It wasn't empty. It was full of everything breaking at once. Then he said something that shattered me. "She told me they were vitamins." His voice was barely a whisper, but each word landed like a hammer. "She said the doctor recommended them for my energy levels. I've been taking them every morning for 6 months, Dad. Every single morning." I pulled out the insurance policy and laid it on the table next to the bottle. He read it, read his own signature at the bottom, and something inside him just collapsed, not physically. Worse, it was like watching a building lose its last load-bearing wall. Everything he thought was solid just gave way. "She's been..." He couldn't finish the sentence, didn't need to. We both knew. That's when Caroline walked in. Book club ended early. She froze in the doorway, saw the bottle, saw the paperwork, saw both of us staring at her. For 1 second, just one, the mask slipped. No smile, no sweetness, just cold calculation. Then she tried to recover. "David, honey, it's not what it looks like. Your dad's confused." But David stood up, and I'd never seen that look on his face before. Pure betrayal, the kind that burns everything it touches. "Don't," he said, voice shaking but firm. "Don't you dare lie to me right now. What is this? What have you been giving me?" She tried to explain, said he'd been depressed, said he'd asked her for help but didn't want to worry me, said the medications were prescribed by a specialist. But David wasn't listening anymore. He was reading that warning label over and over, and I watched him piece it together, every symptom, every exhausted morning, every thought about not waking up. This wasn't depression. This was something being done to him. And the person he trusted most in the world, the person who promised to love and protect him, had been slowly, methodically, dismantling him from the inside. That's when I understood. This wasn't just family betrayal. This was calculated, cold. And if I hadn't found that bottle, if that one mistake hadn't happened, my son wouldn't have made it to Christmas. Caroline tried to leave. Just grabbed her purse and headed for the door like she could walk away from what she'd done. But David blocked her path. And for the first time in months, I saw strength in him again. Not anger, something colder, something final. "You're not going anywhere until we figure this out," he said, voice steady as stone. She started crying then, those practiced tears that probably worked 100 times before, but they weren't working now. I called our family doctor, the real one, and explained everything. Within an hour, we had confirmation. Those medications, mixed at those dosages, were creating a cocktail that would have looked like natural heart failure within weeks, maybe days. I made David pack a bag that night, told him he was staying with me until we sorted everything out. He didn't argue, didn't even look back at Caroline as we walked out. I drove him to my house in complete silence. And when we got inside, he just sat on my couch and stared at his hands. "She was killing me, Dad," he finally said, and his voice broke. And I was helping her do it. I was taking those pills every single morning, trusting her, and she was... I sat next to him, put my hand on his shoulder, and felt him shake. Not from weakness, from the weight of understanding that the person you loved most wanted you gone. The next morning, I did what needed to be done. Called a lawyer, called the insurance company, filed a police report. I gave them everything: the bottles, the photos, the forged prescriptions, the policy with David's shaky signature. Turns out, this wasn't Caroline's first attempt at this kind of family betrayal. She had a history we never bothered checking. 2 previous husbands. Both died under suspicious circumstances. Both had life insurance policies that made her very comfortable. My son was just next in line, and if I hadn't found that bottle, if that one mistake hadn't happened, she would have gotten away with it again. David's recovery took months. Not just physically, though flushing those toxins out of his system was brutal, but emotionally. He had to rebuild everything he thought he knew about love, about trust, about the person he'd shared a bed with for 5 years. There were days he didn't want to get out of bed, days he blamed himself for being too blind to see it. But I reminded him what I learned in construction. When a structure fails, you don't blame the beams for cracking. You blame whoever compromised the foundation. Caroline compromised everything, but we caught it before the whole thing collapsed. I moved David back into my house permanently. Took over managing his recovery, his appointments, his medications, the real ones this time, prescribed by doctors we could actually verify. It wasn't easy. Some nights he'd wake up panicking, thinking he was still taking those pills, still walking toward an edge he couldn't see. But every morning, I was there, made him breakfast, checked his medication with him, reminded him that he was safe now, that I wouldn't let anyone hurt him again, because that's what fathers do. We carry the weight when our kids can't, even when they're grown, even when the danger comes from inside their own home. These days, we have a new routine. Every morning, David and I sit at the kitchen table together, and we go through his medications one by one. We read every label. We verify every dosage. We don't take anything on faith anymore. Trust isn't something we hand out freely like we used to. It's something that has to be earned, rebuilt brick by brick on a foundation that won't crack again. Caroline's facing charges now. The legal system moves slow, but it moves. And my son? He's healing. Not just surviving, actually living again. Laughing, making plans, talking about the future like he's allowed to have one. That bottle saved his life. One label, one mistake, one moment of clarity that pulled back the curtain on a family betrayal so deep it almost cost me everything. So let me ask you something. Have you ever ignored the warning signs because you wanted to believe the best in someone? Have you ever watched someone you love fade away and convinced yourself it was normal? Drop a comment below and share your story. Because revenge stories like this aren't just about justice. They're about waking up before it's too late. If this hit you hard, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and turn on notifications. Because we share real stories here. Stories of survival. Stories of family revenge that starts with one father refusing to let his son disappear. Thanks for listening.